correct in describing Black Lives Matter as a movement more than an organization. You can of course correct me if I'm in error here. What I find the energy of this movement as I think of it, I find this energy powerful and impressive. But a critical question in my mind that I would like you to address, elaborate on today, is the question of how you see Black Lives Matter, the movement. And I have to confess here in sort of parentheses, until this conference, my contact with Black Lives Matter was in mainstream media. I actually wrote a new preface to my book in which I quote you from the Feminist Wire. But mainly my contact with Black Lives Matter has been pretty much through mainstream media, television, radio, newspapers. I do add that qualifier. But the critical question that I would like to ask you and ask you to elaborate on is how you see the Black Lives Matter movement moving from protest, legitimate protest, to community organizing, as Zahara has urged in her remarks. And specifically, if you can, in the limited time that we have here to discuss with you, if you could point to what you think of, if you could point to what you think of as the specifics of this trajectory from protest into grassroots organizing.
Yes. Is this the best way? Okay. Good morning.
Like I said,
good morning. Yes. What an honor to be in this room with so many of my own heroes across generations. Let me start with just doing some clarification about Black Lives Matter. Because I think it's important, if we're going to answer that question, to be grounded in what's happening right now. And I hear there was quite an uproar. So let's have some conversation. So first I want to say that Black Lives Matter gets described in a bunch of different ways. The popular way it gets described is as a hashtag. And then, there's confusion about, well, is it a movement? Is it an organization? Are y'all building something? Are you not? Do you have demands? Do you have a vision? So let me clarify. So Black Lives Matter has always been much more than a hashtag. And hashtags themselves don't have life, right? There are things that trend or don't trend on social media, and social media is a new kind of it's a new forum for discussion, and hashtags allow us to follow the conversation, but hashtags in and of themselves are not organizations, and hashtags in and of themselves are not movements, and we understand that. How do we know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag? Well, first, because as a co-founder, when we created Black Lives Matter, our intentions as three organizers who do work in the form of labor organizing, immigrant rights organizing, and police and prisons organizing, began Black Lives Matter as an organizing network. And we used a series of social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, what's that other one?
Instagram.
To connect people online so that we could take action together offline. We understood from the very beginning that clicking like or retweeting is not organizing, and it's not movement building. But we also understand that there are a growing amount of people, in particular our people, who are very active online, and that folks are looking for a way to plug in, and that we thought we could innovate by being able to say, well, you're doing this here and you're doing this here, and right now y'all know each other on social media, but what would it look like for y'all to do work together on the ground? And can Black Lives Matter be a hub for connection? Can Black Lives Matter be a platform for us to be able to tell our own stories in our own voices? And can Black Lives Matter be a platform also to re-energize radical politics in our communities? We also know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag because it's become a rallying cry and a banner for more protests in 1 year, apparently, right, than during the height of the civil rights movement. That's not to say we're better, we're doing better things, but it is to say it has galvanized people taking action in their local communities. We know that Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag because, again, it has grown into an organizing network of more than 26 chapters around the world. And those chapters weren't a part of a business plan. They essentially developed organically after we mobilized more than 500 people on a freedom ride to Ferguson in less than 10 days, after people were watching the brutality and the violence that was happening in Ferguson through mainstream media channels. Folks were seeing tanks on CNN and saying, what can we do, where can we go, and how do we get involved? Right. We organized people not to be disaster tourists, but to lend concrete skills and support to organizers on the ground who were saying to us, hey, lots of folks are coming down here taking selfies with tear gas, but what we need are vehicles where we can tell our own stories our own way. What we need are hands on deck. What we need is to be able to build with other organizers. What came out of that, and I do think this is important, is that we also mobilized Black media on that ride. And so a lot of the ways in which we were able to cut through the media blackout of what was actually happening was by bringing Black journalists and Black bloggers and Black media to give folks a platform. So this is how we see Ferguson leaders getting into Essence magazine. This is how we see Ferguson leaders getting onto BET. This is how we see Ferguson leaders writing op-eds in Ebony, right? Because we mobilize those folks. Black Lives Matter, we know, is more than a hashtag because it's created space for new organizing and new policy. I was just at the Congressional Black Caucus, and Roland Martin reminded us that there have been 40 new laws in 28 states in the last year, all of which having to do with criminal justice reform. So it has opened up possibilities. It has opened up possibilities to make the impossible possible. Black Lives Matter as a movement, and I think some of the politics from the network itself have also offered the opportunity to explain who and what is Black in this country. So we talk about Black folks as immigrants. We talk about Black folks as poor people, as queer people, as trans people. And a lot of the messages that get reflected from mainstream media is that we are not that. And some of those messages are often sometimes reflected in our own communities. Let's see. It's also been an opportunity to challenge traditional leadership structures. And I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot of galvanizing around trying to figure out, right? How do we exercise power in a transformative way? All of our chapters are involved in local organizing, every last one of them. And it spans the range of issues, in particular labor organizing, so traditional labor. We have a lot of labor activists and organizers, but also folks who work in worker centers, right? Education organizing, so folks who are fighting the privatization of schools, folks who are fighting the push-outs, right? Folks who are fighting the school-to-prison pipeline, folks who are organizing to keep public services public, folks who are organizing around housing and gentrification, folks who are organizing around equal protection and equal access to education, to employment, and to democracy. And in particular, Black trans folks have been leading that fight. So I think those things are really important for us to understand. And we see ourselves as a network of different forms of organization. We see ourselves as a network of different strategies and approaches. And we think that the compilation of those different strategies and approaches can tell us something about where we need to go. In closing, two things. The other thing that we know about why Black Lives Matter is more than a hashtag is because we were doing intentional work, and I appreciated Charlene for talking about BYP's model around queer feminist organizing. We think there's an incredible opportunity right now to organize around transforming masculinity from toxic to transformative. And so what that means is, right, sometimes we get described as, we all only want to deal with Black queer folks. And we're like, no, because we've always said that all Black lives matter. And that includes the lives of Black cisgender men. But it is to say that we want to push around what does it mean to have masculinity, which is not a bad thing, It's not a bad thing. And contrary to popular opinion, right, we're not like, we hate men. We don't hate men at all. We love y'all. But it is to say that if we're going to attack and dismantle the power structures that keep us oppressed, that we have to understand patriarchy as one line of those power structures. And that part of getting to the root of racial capitalism and patriarchy and imperialism is by really looking at, well, how can we transform, not reform and fix and band-aid, but how can we transform some of the dynamics that we reproduce because we've come up in those dynamics. This is a moment for us to do that, and we believe fundamentally that the Black Lives Matter movement, which is bigger than the network, much, much bigger, much, 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 much bigger, is creating space to make the impossible possible. Not just for compromise, not just for the same old, not just for little fixes here and there, but to actually advance the vision that you all created space for us to have. So I'll leave that there.